The way that the conceptualization of Hobbiton began was on our first trip to the location. We flew up there with Alan Lee and John Howe, our two conceptual artists.
There was a lovely bit of farmland up near Hamilton that the film paid the farmer not to put his sheep on there for a while.
Andrew.
This is Andrew. Nice to meet you, Andrew. I haven't met you before. This is Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Very pleased to meet you.
Yes.
It was a very sort of steep, swampy piece of ground. People going out there now would not realise what the film company started with at the beginning.
We drove in, got out of the vehicles and looked at this place and thought, my God, we've just come to Hobbiton. There was the place for Bag End, there was the place for the mill, there's where the Green Dragon would go, here's where the Hobbit holes could go.
And they literally just sat there with their sketch pads transforming this farmland on paper from just hills into a Hobbit village. Several months of very extensive work followed, which involved major earthworks. Just scoop out some of that and maybe put veggie patches in the middle. The establishment of a very solid road, which the New Zealand Army helped to build for us.
When the Army arrived with a great convoy of machinery and trucks, as it came up Buckton Road over here, the neighbours thought warfare was coming to the district, I think, and my phone was red hot that night. All around the chimney should be little bits of bracken. And
one of the things that's essential with Hobbiton is that this place has to look like hobbits have lived here for hundreds of years. And so we actually started to plant vegetables in the gardens of Hobbiton about a year before our filming. So we planted hedges and allowed them to grow for a year.
Real moss, real grass, real trees, and apparently real homes still set into the rolling hills. And it meant that I didn't have to use my imagination anymore, because Hobbiton was there for the camera and the audience to see, and for Gandalf to feel at home.
Cat things.
When you read the books, if you have any sort of imaginative bone in your body, you can't help but have an exact picture in your mind's eye of what Hobbiton looks like. And then to show up on the sets, you sort of think, that's exactly how I pictured it.
I remember the first day really clearly. We had already been portraying hobbits for a few months, and we got to go where hobbits were born. Sit.
Yeah.
I mean, that one.
Hobbiton was incredible. When we all arrived there, we thought everyone wanted to stay there, you know.
We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. The Hobbit holes and the pathways and the, vegetable gardens and the wheat field.
Yeah, the sort of town center and the pub and this amazing bridge over this little pond. And it was just absolutely gorgeous.
All of the things that are rich and luscious and right about what was described in the trilogy about Hobbiton were there.
So you grab it, you eat, and put it down again, and then with your mouth full, you will say,
Say what you like about Mad Baggins, but no one keeps a better table.
And cut. We walked around, and it was all to our scale, so we could walk around and feel like hobbits. Open the doors and walk through the gardens and walk down the streets and see other people walking around like hobbits, and it was amazing.
Some of my favourite days filming certainly have been in Hobbiton when we did Bilbo's party, because there's a huge party atmosphere and there's cakes and people are dancing and it's just hobbits in their element having fun.
And it in a way ultimately does represent what is at stake throughout the entire saga of the Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings is a mythology, it is a fairy tale, it's an adventure story. It never happened, except somewhere in our hearts. And yet there was Hobbiton in 3 dimensions and smoke coming out of the holes where they live underground. And I believed.
Stand by, everyone. Everyone's video, please. And action!
When the hobbits arrive at the Bree gates, they arrive in the pouring rain and they're looking for a tavern called the Prancing Pony.
We have taken an enormous amount of care to try and build a cultural history to the peoples of Middle-earth through the use of props and wardrobe and set design.
One of the parts that came to me from Peter were that he wanted it to be a very real world. He wanted to believe that all of this existed, you know, like an alternative reality, I suppose, or a world before this world. So he wanted an incredible depth to it.
There was a darkness, a slightly gothic edge to Bree. The buildings all felt as though they were sort of leaning in over you, and of course all the humans were leaning in over the hobbits.
The hobbits have left the comfort of the Shire, and now all of a sudden the big folk are all around and you can't look anybody in the eye, and the faces that Peter, you know, the actors that he hired, gritty, intense, and so Bree is, in the books and in the movies, the first time that the hobbits have begun an adventure, I suppose, that is perilous.
Stand by for take. Lots of light, lots of bubble and animation.
To believe the story, you've got to believe the world you're in, and a lot of work has gone into the detail, even though the camera won't pick up on it all.
Roll sound. Sound speed. Background action. And action.
You build an environment for the actors to act in.
For example, we have engaged this potter, Merrick Schmizik, and he made all the pottery throughout the movie, including the pottery you see in Hobbiton and the Prancing Pony, and all of the stuff made according to Alan Lee's designs.
Many.
You don't expect to see every part of it on the screen, but you do build the whole environment. And if it gets shot, that's a real bonus. But if it doesn't get shot, it's still given those guys an environment to carry their craft forward, you know.
And my third cousin's second to move on his father's side, if you follow me. Steady on, Frodo.
And that's the thing, even though in this film you may not see some of those details, they're definitely there, all put together to create such a rich world.
There is so much that we reference to Tolkien just within the production design, the visual look of the film. It actually makes it feel very real and historical.
644, take 8.
3, 2, 1, go.
Coming back, thank you.
X19.3 Charlie, G camera mark.
The Black Riders are one of the most memorable things of the book. I think a lot of people that read the book remember the Black Riders. Particularly the scene where the hobbits have to hide beneath a rotten log as the Black Rider stops in the forest sniffing them.
There's a mushroom patch, so, you know, Mary will have the bag. You guys will be carefully tucking them, because, I mean, this is your next feast. It's, like, amazing. You know, you're going to grab these, you're going to fry them up.
I wanted that scene to be as much of feeling like it came from the pages of the book as I possibly could. It was actually the scene that we shot on the first day of the shoot.
You know, that moment, I think, it's pure evil that this thing exudes. So you can sort of have your eyes looking up or looking at each other.
It was our very first scene, and so I was able to put quite a bit of time into thinking about it.
Roll sound. 33, take 1, hitting camera A.
And just action hobbits with the mushrooms.
Get off the road! Quick!
And horse!
We hide underneath this log, and this Black Rider approaches, and he's aware of the ring, and he gets off his horse, and he's smelling for us and everything.
They can only see shadows in our world. They have very poor eyesight, but they have this incredible sense of smell. So they're like hounds, bloodhounds, sniffing the ring.
And Pete had this incredible idea, which was that not only are the hobbits scared, but also everything around the Black Rider is affected by his evilness.
And you don't mind a big spider crawling down that?
You've got big spiders?
So he had moths flying out of the log and worms coming up from the ground and crawling away, and a huge spider comes across my shoulder, and I pick it up and I put it on this log and it crawls away, just to show that it's just something that it just infects everything around. You know, Black Riders are just pure evil.
To have these things descending down on us that we don't even know what they are, these ring wraiths, really puts into perspective just how little the hobbits are and what they're really up against.
Right, come, wait.
Well, that was good for me. Can we just check the position of that horse again?
The Nazgul, the Black Riders, actually used used to be kings and have since fallen into the legion of Sauron and basically work for him to attain the ring and return it to its master.
The concept of the Black Riders is creepy. The fact that these creatures are solely attempting to find the ring which Frodo has in his possession, so they are purposely after Frodo Baggins.
Okay, moving off. Stand by, please. Shooting.
My actually first scene in the film, I'm trying to outrun the ring wraiths on a horse to protect Frodo, and oh my God. The 9 Black Riders over my shoulder at full gallop and canter coming at me with their clawed hands and they have no face. It was absolutely terrifying.
They're scary. They're the sort of things of which nightmares are made from.
When Frodo puts on the ring, he sees the ring wraiths for who they actually are, which is these kind of old, ghost-like, decrepit kings, you know, far from their original form and extremely frightening.
Those costumes that you see as a big black shroud are so complex underneath, structurally.
Okay, how does it feel?
And there's over 50 meters of fabric in each one of them. So those guys are carrying one hell of a load of weight when they're riding.
You know, these horrible sort of vampire-like creatures that have no memory of what they were, you know. They're these empty, tormented beings.
Well, they're like anything black, aren't they? They absorb the light. And because they absorb the light, they absorb the hope that you may have to escape.
It thrills me beyond belief to see those ring wraiths on screen. It thrills me how terrifying they are.
They're creepy, they're for real because they have physical limitations, but on the other hand, they should be sinister and scary because they can take you to Mordor.
The elven refuge of Rivendell is hidden away in a deep valley in the foothills of the Misty Mountains, amongst woodlands, rivers, and waterfalls.
Rivendell is one of the real legendary locations in the book.
Action!
I think that's one of the challenges of making a book into a film or even illustrating a book. You are supplanting someone's imagination with something that they're actually going to see with their eyes.
Rivendell is almost like an ideal community where elves live in a very close harmony with nature.
The hobbits have always been fascinated by elves because elves are creatures that are rarely seen but are shrouded in mystery.
So like people in the Shire have no idea that the elves live in trees in Rivendell.
As hobbits, this was all new to us as well, so we could easily convey those kind of emotions because it was quite different and beautiful.
Director Peter Jackson imagined an ethereal environment of faded grandeur.
Rivendell had an autumnal feeling, and that was partly because Rivendell is actually a society that's slightly in decay.
It feels old and definitely past its prime, which is quite suitable for the slight kind of air of melancholy that there is around that whole area of the elves.
It was this amazing forest with these little tiny, you know, this amazing intricate set kind of plopped down in the middle of it.
The artists looked to Celtic decorative art and Art Nouveau as the starting points for elvish design.
Rivendell has a sort of fantasy, flowing beauty to it, and it's layers and layers, and everything has detail. Every pillar has things carved. Every roof has various filigree, and all the lanterns have beautiful shapes.
Rivendell was filmed on a variety of locations, including several enormous sound stages, an elaborate miniature set, and a large regional park north of Wellington.
I actually went out there a few times and just sat and sketched. That was a lovely experience, actually, just being there in this very beautiful environment. Trying to design a film set for the elves in the same way that the elves would have designed their own habitation, which is very much part of nature.
I've never seen anything like it. I mean, there was waterfalls, and just every little nook and cranny was so beautiful.
One of the interesting things is the water in this system is a totally enclosed system that we've brought the water in by tanker and we will take it out by tanker. We can't introduce any of this water into the natural river system because the possibilities of chlorine. So the whole system is a waterproof system in the ground that can't leak.
Rivendell has a huge amount of green, a huge amount of flowers, vines.
We wanted to, as the elves would have done, to have made the buildings kind of fit around the trees so that we wouldn't actually have too much of an impact on the landscape.
I mean, it's just this perfect little magical place in the middle of everything green and alive.
Okay, let's set up, please. Picture.
You know, it's funny because the shooting schedule in some really interesting ways mimics the adventures that the hobbits go through in the books. And so to all of a sudden be able to walk onto a set that was this paradise, this sort of Garden of Eden, this tranquil, lush, beautiful environment, there was no acting required.
Cut. That was good. That was nice.
I think Rivendell was a good example of somewhere that felt real, but also totally unlike anywhere that anyone had ever been before.
Here we go now, please, shooting. Thank you.
Because Tolkien has invented a language, the Elvish language, as well as Black speech and Dwarvish, we're there to make sure that the actors get to grips with that.
You want to check that line, Liv? You happy with it? You're
I know.
Yeah, thank you. Here we go. Thank you.
We have worked very, very hard at making that as authentic as possible, that every time somebody says a name or a place or a language, we're very, very confident that it's exactly how Tolkien would have himself spoken it. And cut. That was good. That was nice. In the movies we have Elvish, both Sindarin and Quenya is spoken quite extensively with subtitles.
During the Rivendell scenes and the Lothlorien scenes, there's plenty of Elvish that's spoken. And so we had to have a lot of consultation on that to be accurate.
Hi, as I go over my lines in embarrassment.
Obviously we started with Tolkien's instructions as to how these words should be spoken and how the languages work. We have 2 full-time dialogue coaches who have been on the film since the first day. They regularly have time with the actors where they train the actors and how to speak the languages that need to be spoken.
There is a tendency when you get a line of a foreign language that you don't understand, and you only know the sounds, you impose your own intonation pattern or your own tune onto that sentence. And that's why we've always had to say to the actors, well, you're the actor, you in the end have to decide which words are important for you, but this is what they mean.
At first that was so terrifying to me, but for some reason I've been able to pick it up really easily and really comfortably in a way that it just kind of rolls off my tongue.
If you know what it is you're saying, you say it as conversationally, then all of a sudden you're sucked into this other world.
Rolling sound.
One of the things that Tolkien says in the book is that their speaking and their singing voices sound like bells chiming. They're just supposedly really magical and beautiful, and it really does sound that way when you speak it.
Tolkien's connection with language goes right back into his childhood. He was making new languages even as a small child, and obviously from that he made the people to go with them. But the languages came first, and it's the power of communication is such an extraordinary thing. It is the only thing that makes us different from the other inhabitants of our planet. And I think the difference in languages says everything about the difference in cultures. And I think that was probably what fascinated him, the sound of words and how they differed from culture to culture. And all those ancient languages that he studied encoded within them an entire society.
Rolling. Sit.
And action.
They are the Maiar. They are immortal in human form.
They're more like angelic spirits who inhabit the bodies of old men, and they are on Middle-earth to advise the peoples of Middle-earth how to combat evil. But there's a difference between Saruman and Gandalf, in that Gandalf is wise but has learnt humility, whereas Saruman is equally wise but has arrogance.
The hierarchy of wizards is
defined by the labeling of colours, which refers to the colours that they wear, actually. You might be a brown wizard, but Gandalf is a grey one. Gandalf the Grey. Saruman, slightly higher in the order, is the white, Saruman white.
And Saruman is very definitely the most brilliant, the most powerful, with the greatest intellect and the greatest knowledge. Gandalf himself says that.
2, 1, action!
And so Saruman and Gandalf represent opposites of the same character, of what can happen if you have great strength and power. So it was a wonderful synergy.
There are so many facets, sides to Saruman. The leader, the immortal, the fantastic brain, but he misuses it.
So a central part of the story of the films is a battle between the two wizards. Why should Gandalf not be ambitious and in that way, and selfish? Well, we just know that he isn't. And the human form he took was not to become a great leader, or emperor, or politician. You know, Tolkien and Gandalf are on the side of the ordinary people.
And 1.
One of the important things with the music in the story is that we wanted it to reflect the different cultures of the Lord of the Rings. You know, reading it off the page, it's incredibly rich with the language of the dwarves and the elves and the humans and the hobbits. But of course, the one thing that you don't get from reading the book is you don't hear the music.
This project was daunting, and quite often I felt like Frodo. You know, I would wake up and say, why me? Why have I been chosen to carry this ring? And many times I'd hear Peter's voice along the way saying, you are the one that must do this. You must create the music to this film. That seemed good. I wanted to bring the text of Tolkien back into the film. There's quite a lot of poetry and songs of Tolkien's design, and I wanted to reinsert the poems and the songs back into the story. So we've used ancient Dwarvish in Moria. It was sung by a Maori Samoan choir. We used Elvish, Sindarin, and Quenya in the score, actually sung in the score. Today we did a boys' choir. So this was a way to get some of the detail of the story back into the film.
You've got a nice Tim sound when he arrives.
Yeah.
I think it's a Tim sound. Am I starting to learn the names of all these things?
Yeah.
Or what? Music is certainly an area that I have no expertise and very little knowledge and understanding of. I don't know any of the terminology. I don't know what half the instruments are called. I'm becoming the embodiment of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I know things that I like to hear. I mean, if I hear something, I can sort of somehow try to express to Howard whether I liked it or I didn't like it and offer suggestions. But fortunately, Howard needs very little guidance. That was pretty good, Howard. It seemed to just the soundtrack just stopped right on the point that the horn came in, so there was no breathing space.
Right. So should I stop a beat earlier?
You probably should, I think. Yeah.
Right. He might not be a musician in a traditional sense, but I mean, he has a very, very good understanding of how to use music in a film and how to use it emotionally and dramatically and pacing. I mean, I think he has a fantastic sense of it.
It's very exciting for me when I'm finally here now and I'm hearing it being added to the film at this stage, because it totally enhances it for me. It takes the film that I've shot and it gives the film its heart and soul. The score is very classical. It's a very operatic feel. It's designed really to transport you into another world.
It just seemed right for Middle-earth. I mean, it's a very ancient story. It's 7,000 years ago, and I wanted it to have a feeling of antiquity, and I wanted it to have a historical feel. And I wanted it to have a feeling that it was maybe you discovered the score somewhere in some old locker somewhere at the bottom of a sunken ship or something, you know.
That was good.
Action!
Weathertop is where Strider, at the time, before he is known as Aragorn, and the hobbits, as he's taking them to Rivendell, travel up to the top of this old sort of castle ruin.
Action!
We found a location, brilliant location. It was like a mushroom rock that's about 300 feet high, and it has a top piece of grass that goes out to these limestone edges and then just drops off, and then in underneath there was a hollow on each side, and so we have Weathertop Hollow where they light the little fire, and then we created a staircase running up inside that rock to the Weathertop summit.
Just touch in on a couple of statues as if they're just isolated pops on statues that don't necessarily whip on or whip off, although you can put those in as well.
We've added these statues, which they're not complete yet. They're going to be more broken down than they're appearing at the moment. Take out a sliver like that, take out a wedge. When the face goes back in, it will kind of swing back in that way. The figures were sculpted by one of our very talented sculptors. And she made small maquettes from drawings that I'd done.
You just watch the wire. It's going down.
But as a sculptor, she's probably not the person to be actually attacking them and aging them down. So we have to be very, very careful in sort of not knocking off the best bits.
Push it that way.
I guess they just sort of represent some element of the age of this place, but they're also kind of like a brooding presence, a kind of foreboding of what's about to happen.
It's extremely frightening because it's the first time that the hobbits, had been attacked by the ring wraiths.
The first thing you see is how scared Frodo is, and then you turn and look. And at that point, I think we go to 5 wraiths.
Horse and action!
So we're all armed, and by this point we realise that it's Frodo that they want. So the hobbits are in a formation where they're protecting Frodo.
Just need you circling around amongst yourselves a little bit more, guys. If you could just, that sort of feel. That's nice. One more.
They're in deep trouble when they get up the top.
It was really spooky to sort of be in that environment. Really a hollow, vacant, eerie, scary quality to the way that was described in the books and the way Peter has actualized it in the film.
Just react with your sword, R2. Just, yeah.
Alrighty, lighting up the torch, thanks. Wind and smoke happening, please. Shooting now, standing by.
The whole set says this is not a place you really want to be,
Imagination before reality is so much easier to digest. You imagine a situation, you're like, yeah, I can do it. 15-month film, 3 movies, 5 in the morning, seeing the same people every day. Yeah, all right, it's an adventure. I can do it. But it's so much different than what the actual reality is.
We had an agenda initially to cast English actors as the hobbits. I mean, Tolkien wrote the Shire as England, and hobbits are little English people going out into the big bad world. And a package arrived in the London casting office from Elijah Wood, and Elijah had heard about the project and had a friend of his videotape his own audition.
It wasn't like a normal role. I didn't have to be a human. I could be a hobbit. And there were things that were sort of germane to being a hobbit. That was probably why it was so intriguing.
We were at a desperate point that we really couldn't find a Frodo, and then suddenly we put this videotape in the machine, and that was Frodo. It was an extraordinary thing.
I mean, he was very unusually focused and professional and very mature, and I think that was because of being in the movie business since, he was a boy.
The hero of Lord of the Rings is definitely Frodo Baggins. He is a character who ultimately has to make really the greatest sacrifice.
There's sort of an inner strength in Frodo that makes him unique in being able to accept the responsibility of taking the ring to Mordor and destroying it.
Are you frightened?
Yes.
Not nearly frightened enough.
Shooting now, quiet please.
Gentlemen, we do not stop till nightfall.
Viggo Mortensen plays Aragorn, and he's an incredibly dedicated actor. We couldn't be more lucky for this man who is portraying the struggle to redeem himself from his ancestry and his heritage.
He's self-sufficient, can take care of himself in the woods, can sort of take care of groups of people.
We have no choice but to trust him. But where is he leading us?
Everybody go, go, go!
Viggo can play Aragorn as this sort of mythic hero with a sword and a costume and doing all this amazing stuff, or he can play Aragorn as a real person, and Viggo's playing it real and you really feel it.
It's going to look much more exciting if you keep trying to go for Aragorn and he has to push his way through you.
Viggo has totally embraced the culture that surrounds the use of a sword.
If I just hit the column and it throws me out, down there, and then as it comes...
He is the best swordsman I've ever trained.
I mean, Aragorn is maybe the most physical character in the story. That's part of who he is. I mean, his physical courage or recklessness, depending on how you look at it, is part of what gets him through.
Roll sound and action!
So it'd be nice just to stop the hobbits a bit closer to Orlando, not let them get too far away.
Legolas is a Mirkwood elf, which is one of the woodland realms.
Strangers from distant lands, you will unite or you will fall.
You have my sword.
And you have my bow. He's a warrior, essentially. And that's basically my role in the Fellowship, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to do this sort of swinging motion like this. Yep.
They have a hyper keen sense of sight and hearing and a beautiful relationship with nature, and they're just sort of very powerful, special creatures.
And they're immortal, so they haven't known sickness or pestilence. They can be slain in battle, or they can die of a broken heart, but that's about it.
Anybody shoot?
It's just in the middle of his preparation. He's prepared, so
I'm trying to focus here. I'm trying to get my objectives and my actions right. Just because you don't even think about anything like that, you know. The humans are slightly threatened by the elf.
Was he posing? A comely elf, isn't he?
We have this joke where we dig at each other, me and Aragorn, me and Viggo. Bean Boy, so threatened, these humans, honestly. So threatened by the elves. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, well, at least I don't smell. And at least I'm going to live forever. So we get a little bit of the odd dig here and there, you know. But that's just because I can't use a bow and arrow the way I can. One of the most challenging parts for me was trying to understand a martial art enough and getting the movement right. I always think of him as a cat, in a way. You know how a cat will, like, hop up onto a table and just sort of stop with no forward locomotion? It'll just stop there. And it'll be sitting still and alert on top of a table, you know. They're kind of like that. They have this kind of graceful, poised movement that's always switched on.
Something draws near. I can feel it.
Galadriel is someone who has an edge of danger about her because she is a ring bearer, and she has the potential, if she was to take the One Ring, that she too could turn into the evil force that Sauron is.
There's something beautiful and wonderful about Galadriel, but there's something incredibly creepy and, you know, possibly dangerous about her as well.
Even the smallest person can change the course of the future.
She herself is terrified of the temptation of this ring, because as this ring becomes closer to her, being carried by Frodo into the Lorien woods where she lives, she knows that she will have to face this incredible test of being tempted by this ring, and the thought terrifies her.
Will you look into the mirror?
What will I see?
Even the wisest cannot tell, for the mirror shows many things.
It's kind of ambiguous as whether she's a positive force or a negative force.
Because she's the queen of the elves and the elves are passing over, they are moving on beyond Middle-earth, there's a sadness, a bittersweetness about what she and her kind are going through. And she's handing on the torch to men, to humankind. And I think that in a lot of ways she's challenging the viewers to say, what are you going to do with the earth? What are you going to do with Middle-earth? We've had this paradise, so now you men, you humankind, have the responsibility of this earth. This task was appointed to you, and if you do not find a way, no one will.
Shooting, please, and roll sound.
I think Arwen plays an absolutely critical role in Lord of the Rings because she really does represent love, and Liv Tyler has brought a wonderful etherealness to the part.
The biggest kind of bond that I've had on this film was really with wardrobe and the costume designer Nyla, because I've spent so much time with them trying to find who Arwen was and how these costumes would look. And a lot of the inspiration that we got were from pre-Raphaelite paintings, where obviously there's no corsets and they're kind of very simple, flowing, sensuous shapes.
Here we go now, please, shooting, thank you.
There's an incredible moment when you see an actor settle into the character, and that is really about putting on the costume.
3, 2, 1, draw!
If you want him, come and claim him.
In this film, there are more things to help them do that, as in they get their ears and they get their feet.
Well, I spend about 3 hours in hair and makeup, about an hour to have my ears put on. They're gelatin, so you can only actually use them once. They're really gentle, like if it were to rain, they would basically melt away.
And then they put on the costume and suddenly it all gels for them, and that's a fantastic moment.
It's like being a fairy princess in a funny kind of way for me to be able to come into work and get dressed up in these amazing, feminine, really, really feminine costumes. It's very nice.
Here we go now. Shooting, please. And action.
Gandalf has been around for 7,000 years. He's been sent down by the powers above to help Middle-earth, to protect it from the evil which is contained within the One Ring.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
Gandalf is such a rich character. He's so happily taken on human form that I, as an actor, was able to concentrate on what was more ordinary than immortality.
He can come across as a very cliched wizard. I mean, he even wears the pointed wizard's hat.
Ian came out and did a week with us for early fittings, and I can remember when we first presented him with this hat, I really think he just didn't know what on earth to make of it. So that one was a love-hate relationship.
So I don't think you're sort of holding it in any particularly. I think you're just using it, you know, just as a torch, basically. Yeah.
Gandalf's magic I see as being subtle. I hate seeing fantasy movies where wizards are portrayed having sort of lightning bolts coming out of their fingertips and having all these tricks, and so we made a deliberate attempt to really not give Gandalf any visually cliched magical powers.
Okay, cut!
So, a very human wizard, and therefore a rather easy way into this strange magical world that Tolkien created.
Cut! Good. Okay, we'll just do one more.